A brand new black Range Rover, a faded Georgetown hoodie. That's all it took for an aggressive patrolman to physically assault and handcuff a man pumping gas in an affluent suburb. But the officer made one catastrophic mistake. The man he'd just humiliated was the Chief Circuit Court judge. It was exactly 11:14 p.m. on a freezing Tuesday in November. The wind biting through the affluent streets of Fairfax County, Virginia, carried the promise of an early winter. At the brightly lit Chevron station on the corner of Route 109, the fluorescent lights hummed a low, sterile drone. Samuel T. Gable was exhausted. At 58 years old, he had spent the last 3 decades of his life in the legal trenches, culminating in his appointment as the Chief Judge of the County Circuit Court. He had just wrapped up a grueling, high-stakes civil litigation trial that had kept him in chambers well past dinner. All Samuel wanted was to fill up his gas tank, drive the remaining 4 miles to his home, and sleep. He was dressed for comfort, completely stripped of the heavy black robes and tailored charcoal suits that defined his public persona. He wore a pair of worn grey sweatpants, scuffed New Balance sneakers, and a faded navy blue Georgetown law hoodie pulled up over his head to block the biting wind. He stood beside his vehicle, a pristine Santorini black 2025 Range Rover autobiography. It was a retirement gift to himself, a luxury SUV that he had paid for in cash after decades of meticulous saving. As the premium gasoline flowed into the tank, Samuel stared blankly at the digital numbers ticking upward on the pump, his mind still untangling the complex witness testimonies from earlier that afternoon. He didn't notice the black and white police cruiser until it aggressively swerved off the main road, its tires screeching against the cold pavement as it cut through the gas station lot. Inside the cruiser was Officer Gregory Wallace. Wallace was a 9-year veteran of the local department, a man whose personnel file was a thick, heavily redacted document filled with excessive force complaints and warnings about racial profiling. Wallace was a predator in a badge, a cop who viewed the wealthy streets of Fairfax as his personal kingdom. Beside him in the passenger seat sat Officer Timothy Reed, a rookie barely 6 months out of the academy, still idealistic but too intimidated by Wallace to ever speak up. As the cruiser rolled past the pumps, Wallace's eyes locked onto the Range Rover. Then his gaze shifted to the man holding the gas nozzle, a black man in a hoodie and sweatpants, face partially shadowed, pumping gas into a $150,000 luxury vehicle in a predominantly white, upper-class neighborhood at 11 o'clock at night. In Wallace's prejudiced mind, the math was simple. It was an equation he had solved incorrectly dozens of times before, but one he refused to unlearn. Stolen car, gangbanger, easy arrest. "Look at this guy," Wallace muttered, his voice laced with sudden venom. He slammed the cruiser into reverse. "What is it, Greg?" Rookie Officer Reed asked, his eyes darting toward the gas pumps. "Did we get a call about a stolen vehicle?" "Don't need a call," Wallace sneered, shifting the car into drive and maneuvering it so the front bumper was angled aggressively toward the Range Rover, blocking it from moving forward. "You think a guy dressed like a vagrant legally owns an autobiography? Not in this zip code. Get ready." Without activating his emergency sirens, Wallace flipped on the blinding white takedown lights mounted on the cruiser's light bar. The intense beams flooded the gas station, spotlighting Samuel Gable like a criminal in a lineup. Samuel squinted, raising a hand to shield his eyes from the blinding glare. He remained perfectly still, the gas nozzle still engaged in his vehicle. His heart gave a familiar, sickening thud. Before he was a judge, before he was a prosecutor, he was just a black man in America. He knew exactly what was happening. The door of the cruiser swung open. Officer Wallace stepped out, his posture rigid, his right hand resting ominously on the butt of his holstered service weapon. "Step away from the vehicle," Wallace barked, his voice echoing sharply across the empty asphalt. Samuel slowly released the latch on the gas pump and took a deliberate, measured step back, keeping his hands entirely visible. He did not panic. He did not raise his voice. He had presided over hundreds of civil rights lawsuits and Fourth Amendment violation hearings. He knew the law better than the man currently pointing a flashlight in his face. "Good evening, officer," Samuel said, his voice deep, calm, and resonant with authority. "Is there a problem?" I said, "Step away from the car." "Keep your hands where I can see them," Wallace commanded, closing the distance. He stopped a few feet away, shining the blinding maglite directly into Samuel's eyes. "My hands are clearly visible," Samuel replied evenly. "And I have stepped away from the vehicle. Now, I'll ask you again, officer. What is the issue?" Wallace scoffed, annoyed that the suspect wasn't cowering. "Whose vehicle is this?" "It is mine," Samuel answered. "Yours?" Wallace let out a harsh, condescending laugh. He circled the rear of the Range Rover, inspecting the license plate. A guy dressed in dirty sweatpants driving a brand-new $150,000 Range Rover. You expect me to believe that? "I expect you to do your job within the confines of the law," Samuel said, his tone shifting from polite to strictly professional. "My attire has no bearing on my vehicle registration. Now, unless I have committed a traffic violation while parked at this gas pump, I would like to finish fueling my car and go home." Wallace's face hardened. The disrespect, as he perceived it, ignited a furious spark in his chest. He marched back over to Samuel, invading his personal space. The rookie, Officer Reed, nervously stepped out of the passenger side of the cruiser, standing awkwardly by the front bumper. "You're in the wrong neighborhood to be catching an attitude, buddy," Wallace snarled, leaning in close. "I asked you a question. What are you doing here?" "I live here," Samuel stated flatly. "Right. I need your ID," Wallace demanded, snapping his fingers. "Right now." Samuel didn't move. His legal mind was already cataloguing the violations. This was a Terry stop without reasonable, articulable suspicion. A clear violation of the Fourth Amendment. "Officer," Samuel said, lowering his voice to a steady, dangerous calm, "are you detaining me, or is this a consensual encounter?" The question made Wallace pause for a fraction of a second. Street thugs usually didn't use terms like consensual encounter, but his ego quickly overrode his logic. "You're being detained," Wallace snapped. "Now hand over your ID before I put you on the ground." "On what legal basis am I being detained?" Samuel pressed, standing his ground. "You have not witnessed me commit a crime. You have not cited a traffic infraction. You cannot demand identification without reasonable suspicion of criminal activity." "I have reasonable suspicion," Wallace shouted, pointing at the vehicle. "You look suspicious. The car looks suspicious. For all I know, you carjacked this thing 3 blocks away. Now give me your driver's license." Samuel took a deep breath. "My wallet is in the center console of the vehicle. If you want me to retrieve it, I will need to reach into the car. However, I want to state for the record that I am doing so under duress, and I do not consent to any search of my vehicle or my person." Wallace smirked, misinterpreting the legal jargon as a desperate attempt to stall. "Don't play lawyer with me, boy. I'll get the ID myself." The word boy hung in the freezing night air like a venomous cloud. Samuel's jaw tightened. He had been called many things in his life, but it had been decades since a uniformed officer had the audacity to use that particular racial slur to his face. Before Samuel could process the insult, Officer Wallace lunged forward. "Turn around and put your hands on the hood," Wallace yelled, his voice cracking with adrenaline. He didn't wait for Samuel to comply. He grabbed Samuel's left shoulder, attempting to forcefully spin the older man around. Samuel, though in his late 50s, was a broad-shouldered man who kept himself in excellent shape. He planted his feet and instinctively tensed, refusing to be thrown against his own vehicle like a rag doll. "Remove your hand from my person," Samuel ordered, his voice echoing with the commanding boom he usually reserved for unruly defense attorneys in his courtroom. "Stop resisting!" Wallace screamed, the classic catchphrase of an officer trying to justify excessive force. He unclipped his handcuffs with his free hand. "Reed, get over here! He's resisting!" Officer Reed rushed over, his eyes wide with panic. "Greg, maybe we should just run the plates." "Grab his other arm!" Wallace interrupted, shoving Samuel hard against the side of the Range Rover. The heavy metal buckle of Samuel's sweatpants scratched against the pristine black paint. Samuel did not fight back. He knew better. He knew that the slightest aggressive movement would result in a taser deployment, or worse, a gunshot. He let his body go limp, allowing Wallace to wrench his arms painfully behind his back. The cold steel of the handcuffs bit deeply into his wrists, tightened far beyond protocol. They ratcheted down to the bone, sending sharp, shooting pain up his forearms. "You are making a catastrophic mistake, officer," Samuel said through gritted teeth, his face pressed against the cold glass of his own window. "Shut your mouth!" Wallace hissed, forcefully patting down Samuel's pockets, deliberately roughing him up. Finding nothing but a set of house keys and a cell phone, he yanked Samuel backward by the chain of the handcuffs. "Stand right there. Move, and I'll drop you." Wallace turned his attention to the Range Rover. The driver's side door was unlocked. "Officer," Samuel warned loudly, despite the pain radiating from his wrists, "I explicitly stated I do not consent to a search of my vehicle. You do not have probable cause." "You're in handcuffs, buddy." "I have probable cause to inventory the vehicle," Wallace lied, pulling the heavy car door open. The luxurious interior lights illuminated the cabin. The smell of rich leather and the faint scent of expensive cologne drifted out. Wallace leaned into the vehicle, tearing open the center console. He tossed a few charging cables and a pack of gum onto the passenger seat, aggressively rummaging through the compartments. He finally found the sleek, black leather wallet. He snatched it up, opening it aggressively to pull out the driver's license. But as Wallace was fumbling with the wallet, Rookie Officer Reed had walked around to the passenger side, peering through the window with his flashlight. Reed's beam of light landed on the passenger seat. Sitting perfectly center on the pristine leather was a rich, mahogany-brown leather briefcase. It wasn't a cheap bag. It was the kind of briefcase carried by men who ran corporations or countries. And stamped in beautiful gold leaf lettering across the top flap were the words, "Honorable Samuel T. Gable, Chief Judge, 19th Judicial, Circuit Court." Reed's heart stopped. The blood drained from his face so fast he felt dizzy. He blinked, aiming the flashlight closer, praying he had misread it. But the gold lettering glared back at him in the harsh white light. Beside the briefcase, resting on the passenger seat, was a thick stack of manila folders stamped with the official seal of the state judiciary. Resting on top of those folders was a laminated, high-level courthouse security badge featuring a clear, smiling photograph of the man currently handcuffed outside in the freezing cold. Greg," Reed stammered, his voice trembling so badly he could barely get the words out. "Hold on, I got his ID," Wallace said from the driver's side, holding the license up to the street lamp. He squinted at it. Samuel Thomas Gable. "Greg," Reed said again, louder this time, his voice cracking into a high-pitched squeak. "Greg, look at the passenger seat. Look at the bag." Wallace ignored him, stepping out of the car and marching back over to Samuel. He held the ID up near Samuel's face, comparing the photo to the man in the hoodie. "All right, Samuel," Wallace said, his tone dripping with mock sweetness. "Let's see if this license actually belongs to you, or if we're adding identity theft to the list of charges tonight." "Look at the passenger seat, Officer Wallace," Samuel said softly, his eyes boring into the cop's skull with the intensity of a laser. "Listen to your partner." Wallace frowned, turning his head. "What are you whining about, Reed?" Reed jogged around the front of the vehicle, his face pale as a ghost. He looked absolutely terrified. He pointed a shaky finger toward the open door. "His bag, Greg. Look at his bag. And his badge." "What badge?" Wallace scoffed, leaning back into the car and shining his own light across the console. His light hit the gold lettering on the briefcase. "Honorable Samuel T. Gable, Chief Judge." Wallace froze. His breath hitched in his throat. The flashlight in his hand trembled slightly. For a solid 5 seconds, the gas station was dead silent, save for the hum of the fluorescent lights and the distant sound of the wind. Wallace's mind raced, scrambling for an out. His ego, engorged by years of unchecked power, refused to accept reality. The cognitive dissonance was too loud. Instead of realizing his horrifying mistake, Wallace doubled down. He convinced himself it was a prop, a stolen bag, an elaborate ruse. "You think you're smart," Wallace growled, backing out of the car and storming toward Samuel. "You stole a judge's briefcase to make yourself look legitimate. You think I'm stupid?" Rookie Officer Reed gasped, taking a step back in sheer horror. "Greg, stop! The photo on the ID matches the courthouse badge. It's him! It's really him!" Wallace didn't want to hear it. He grabbed Samuel by the bicep, his grip brutal and unrelenting. "Get in the car!" Wallace snarled, dragging the chief judge toward the rear of the police cruiser. "You are crossing a line from which there is no return, Gregory Wallace," Samuel said, his voice entirely devoid of fear, replaced instead by a chilling, absolute certainty. He had read the officer's nameplate. "You have assaulted me, falsely imprisoned me, and illegally searched my property. I suggest you remove these cuffs." "Get in the damn car!" Wallace roared, pushing Samuel's head down and violently shoving him into the cramped, hard plastic back seat of the patrol cruiser. He slammed the heavy door shut with a deafening thud, trapping the most powerful legal figure in the county behind a cage of reinforced steel. Wallace turned around, breathing heavily, the adrenaline masking the creeping dread that was starting to gnaw at the edges of his mind. He looked at his rookie partner. Officer Reed was hyperventilating, staring at Wallace like he had just committed murder. "Greg," Reed whispered, his eyes wide with a terror that would soon be legally justified. "Do you know what you just did? You just arrested the Chief Circuit Judge." The ride to the station was suffocatingly silent. In the back of the cruiser, Chief Judge Samuel T. Gable sat perfectly rigid, his wrists throbbing against the over-tightened steel of the handcuffs. He focused his mind, mentally drafting the federal civil rights complaint he would file before the sun came up. In the front seat, the atmosphere was poisonous. Officer Gregory Wallace gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles were white, his jaw locked in stubborn denial. Beside him, Rookie Officer Timothy Reed was frantically typing under his jacket, discreetly texting his union representative. Reed knew his career was hanging by a thread, and he wanted it on record that he had tried to stop the madness. The cruiser pulled into the sally port of the Fairfax County District Station. The heavy steel garage doors ground shut behind them. "Get out!" Wallace barked, opening the rear door and hauling Samuel out by the collar of his hoodie. "I'm stepping out, officer," Samuel said calmly. "There is no need to rip my clothing. You are on camera in this facility." "I don't care about the cameras," Wallace sneered, though a faint tremor in his voice betrayed his crumbling confidence. He shoved Samuel toward the heavy metal doors leading to the booking area. They walked into the bright, chaotic hum of the precinct. Telephones rang, radios squawked, and a pair of intoxicated suspects were arguing with a booking officer in a holding cell. At the elevated front desk sat Lieutenant Thomas O'Malley, a 30-year veteran of the force who was just weeks away from retirement. O'Malley was sipping from a styrofoam cup of black coffee, reviewing a stack of incident reports. "Got a hostile one for you, LT," Wallace announced loudly, marching Samuel to the front of the booking desk. "Suspicious vehicle, refusal to identify, resisting arrest." Lieutenant O'Malley didn't look up immediately. "Put him in cell 3, Greg. I'll get to the paperwork in a minute." "I demand you call the watch commander, Lieutenant." Samuel's deep, authoritative voice cut through the noise of the precinct like a thunderclap. It wasn't the erratic yelling of a drunk. It was the measured, booming command of a man used to ruling over a courtroom. O'Malley's pen stopped. He knew that voice. He had testified in front of that voice dozens of times over the last decade. Slowly, dread pooling in his stomach, O'Malley lowered his paperwork and looked over the edge of the elevated desk. He saw the faded Georgetown hoodie. He saw the scuffed sneakers. And then he saw the face of the man wearing them. The styrofoam cup slipped from O'Malley's fingers, hitting the desk and spilling hot coffee over his keyboard. He didn't even notice. The blood completely drained from his face. "Judge Gable," O'Malley whispered, standing up so fast his chair crashed into the wall behind him. "Good evening, Thomas," Samuel replied, his tone chillingly even. "It seems your officers have brought me in for driving my own vehicle." Panic, pure and unadulterated, exploded behind O'Malley's eyes. He practically vaulted over the short swinging door of the desk, sprinting toward them. "Greg, what the hell have you done?" O'Malley roared, his face turning a dangerous shade of crimson. "Take those cuffs off him! Take them off right now!" Wallace blinked, his stubborn facade finally cracking. "LT, he was driving a $150,000 Range Rover. He wouldn't show ID. He is the chief circuit court judge of this county, you absolute moron!" O'Malley screamed, spittle flying from his lips. "He signs your warrants. Uncuff him before I arrest you for kidnapping." The word kidnapping hung in the air. The entire booking room went dead silent. The intoxicated suspects stopped arguing. The other officers froze. Wallace's hands began to shake uncontrollably. He reached for his handcuff keys, fumbling blindly as his brain finally processed the magnitude of his error. It took him 3 tries to get the key into the slot. When the steel jaws finally snapped open, Samuel slowly brought his arms forward. Deep, angry red indents circled his wrists, already beginning to bruise purple. He rubbed them methodically, never breaking eye contact with Wallace. I didn't know," Wallace stammered, taking a step back, looking like a man who had just stepped on a landmine. "You didn't look like a judge." "And what precisely does a judge look like at 11 o'clock at night at a gas station, Officer Wallace?" Samuel asked quietly. The silence in the room made his voice carry to every corner. "Did I not look like a judge? Or did I just look like a target?" I apologize, Your Honor, O'Malley pleaded, looking physically ill. Let me call Chief Reynolds. Right now. We will handle this internally. He will be suspended immediately. Samuel adjusted the sleeves of his hoodie. Do not bother calling Arthur. I will speak to the Chief of Police tomorrow morning in my chambers, accompanied by my attorney. And Lieutenant? Yes, Your Honor. Preserve all body-worn camera footage, dash cam footage, and holding cell footage from the last 45 minutes. If a single frame of data goes missing, I will hold you personally in contempt of court, and I will have the FBI down here investigating a cover-up before lunch. Do we understand each other? Yes, sir. O'Malley swallowed hard. Perfectly. Samuel turned on his heel and walked out of the precinct, the heavy metal doors slamming shut behind him, leaving Wallace to face the absolute destruction of his life. By 8 a.m. the following morning, the legal earthquake hit. Samuel Gable did not just want an apology. He wanted systemic extermination of the rot within the department. He retained Benjamin Roth, a high-profile civil rights litigator from Washington, D.C., known for ruthlessly dismantling corrupt police departments. They filed a massive Section 1983 civil rights lawsuit against Fairfax County, the police department, and Officer Gregory Wallace in his personal and professional capacity. The damages sought were staggering: $13.8 million. The complaint cited false imprisonment, battery, illegal search and seizure, and a blatant violation of the Equal Protection Clause. The sheer dollar amount was designed not just to compensate, but to bankrupt the county's insurance policies, forcing them to overhaul their training and hiring practices. The county's legal team panicked. They immediately offered a $2 million settlement, provided Samuel signed a strict non-disclosure agreement. They wanted the incident buried. Samuel rejected it in less than 5 minutes. He wanted everything in the sunlight. As the discovery phase began, a shocking twist emerged. The county attorneys confidently stated that Officer Wallace's body cam had experienced a technical malfunction during the initial stop, and the cruiser's dash cam was allegedly corrupted. It was a classic, desperate cover-up attempt orchestrated by the police union. But they underestimated the judge. Benjamin Roth subpoenaed the security footage from the Chevron gas station. The station was independently owned by a man named Leo Kowalski, who had recently upgraded his entire security system after a string of late-night robberies. During the preliminary hearing, Roth played the footage in open court. It wasn't grainy, black and white tape. It was crystal clear, 4K resolution color video. And even worse for the defense, Kowalski had installed high-fidelity exterior microphones at the pumps. The entire courtroom listened in stunned silence as the audio played. They heard the screeching tires. They heard the unprovoked hostility. They heard Samuel calmly state his rights. And they heard Officer Wallace use the word boy. They watched, in high definition, as Wallace violently shoved the Chief Circuit Court judge against the vehicle and illegally searched his property, ignoring the frantic warnings of his own rookie partner. The judge presiding over the civil case, a federal magistrate who had known Samuel for years, literally took his glasses off and stared at the defense table in sheer disbelief. The malfunctioning bodycam defense collapsed instantly. The attempted cover-up became a secondary scandal, triggering an immediate investigation by the Department of Justice. The fallout was absolute. Faced with undeniable high-definition proof of racial profiling, brutality, and an attempted evidence cover-up, the county capitulated. They agreed to the full $13.8 million settlement to avoid a drawn-out federal trial that would have exposed even more corruption. Officer Timothy Reed, the rookie, was given immunity in exchange for testifying against his training officer. He confessed that Wallace had deliberately targeted Samuel based on his race and vehicle. Gregory Wallace was fired, stripped of his badge, and lost his pension entirely. But Samuel wasn't done. Under pressure from the DOJ investigation, federal prosecutors indicted Wallace for deprivation of rights under color of law. He was convicted and sentenced to 48 months in a federal penitentiary. Samuel Gable took the $13.8 million and established a legal defense fund for marginalized citizens of Fairfax County who had been victims of police misconduct. He returned to the bench, his authority stronger than ever, a living reminder that the law applies to everyone, especially those who wear a badge. If this story of justice served got your blood pumping, hit that like button right now. Share this video with your friends to spread the word that no one is above the law, and make sure to subscribe to the channel for more unbelievable, true-to-life stories of dramatic legal revenge. Drop a comment below. What would you have done if you were in the judge's shoes? Thanks for watching, and see you next time.